The footman at the door of Caelan Estate looked at Vespera Ashby's dress for a long moment, and then he looked at the invitation card in her hand, and his face went through several small changes before it settled on pity. "Are you quite certain, miss?" "The card says the showcase is open to any weaver in the county," Vespera said. "I am a weaver in the county." "That you are, miss." He stepped aside. "God help you." She walked into the ballroom of Caelan Estate wearing a dress stitched from rags, not poor cloth. Rags. Torn strips of ruined factory cotton, some of them scorched brown at the edges, some stained with dye that had gone wrong in the vat, all of them fished out of the river below the outer district mills, where the millmasters dumped whatever they could not sell. She had spent 11 weeks cutting those strips into shapes and joining them by hand, sitting at her table until her fingers cracked, because she owned 4 shillings and a loom, and nothing else in the world. And because the invitation said any weaver in the county, and because she had decided a long time ago that she would rather be laughed at than never be looked at all. 300 people in silk turned to look at her. The ballroom went quiet the way a room does when everyone in it decides at the same instant not to be the first to speak. Ladies in pale blue sarcenet, gentlemen in black tailcoats, all of them holding glasses of hock, all of them staring at a girl in a dress made of refuse. Somewhere near the orchestra, a woman laughed behind her fan and stopped herself. Vespera lifted her chin and walked on. She had come to ask for an apprenticeship. That was all. Lord Stirling of Caelan took one weaver into his workshops every autumn, and every autumn the place went to the son of some merchant who could pay for the privilege, and every autumn Vespera Ashby had watched from the outside and thought, if they would only look at the cloth, if they would only look at the cloth and not at me. So she had made herself impossible not to look at. "Good heavens," said a man in green. "Has something crawled up out of the drains? It's a costume, surely." "It is not a costume," Vespera said, and her voice carried further than she meant it to. "It is my work." That was when the laughing began properly, and that was when the crowd near the great staircase parted, and that was when she saw him. Lord Stirling came down the stairs slowly, one hand on the rail, and the whole room seemed to lean away from him as he passed. Vespera had heard the stories in the mills, the way everyone had heard them. The Duke who never smiled, 32 years old, and not one smile in the whole of his life, not as an infant in his cradle, not as a boy, not once since the night his mother and father died and left him alone in a house with 60 rooms and no one in it. The nurses had tried, the tutors had tried, a physician had come from London when he was 9 and examined his face and gone away again with nothing to write in his book. He was tall and lean and dressed in black, dark hair swept back from a hard, handsome face, and his eyes were the grey of river water in November. He stopped 4 steps from the bottom and looked at her. "Who let this in?" "I came in through the door, my lord, like everyone else." "You came in through the door," Stirling repeated, wearing the contents of a rubbish heap to a showcase of the finest textiles in England. "Yes, my lord." "Why?" "Because I could not afford to come in anything better," Vespera said, "and because I wanted you to see what I can do with nothing. Anyone can weave beauty out of lion's silk, my lord. I should like to see them do it out of what your mills throw away." And Lord Stirling laughed. It was a short, cold, dreadful sound, and the whole ballroom heard it, and 300 people drew breath at once, because not one of them had ever heard it before in their lives. A lady dropped her glass. The orchestra stopped mid-bar. Stirling himself seemed almost surprised by it, the way a man is surprised by a cough. "Out of what my mills throw away," he said. "Out of what my mills—" He stopped. Above them, the great chandelier turned very slightly on its chain, as chandeliers do when 100 candles heat the air beneath them, and the light came down across the ballroom floor at a new angle, and it fell on Vespera Ashby's dress. And the rags lit up, Every scorched strip, every stained patch, every ruined scrap of cotton she had joined together over 11 weeks, the light struck them, and they did not look like rags at all. They looked like a pattern, a vast interlocking geometric pattern that ran from her shoulder to the hem in a spiral, each fragment sitting exactly where the fragment before it demanded, the burns and the dye stains lining up into shapes that repeated and turned and repeated again, and the whole thing shifting as she breathed so that the spiral seemed to move. Sterling's laughter died in his throat. He came down the last 4 steps. He crossed the floor. He stopped in front of her, close enough that she could see his face had gone entirely white, and he did not ask her permission before he reached out and took the hem of her sleeve between 2 fingers. He turned it to the light. "Where," he said, and his voice was not the same voice, "did you learn this pattern?" "I didn't learn it, I made it. The pieces only fit that way, my lord, if you set them—" "Where did you learn it?" "Nowhere. My lord, you're hurting my arm." He let go. He stepped back, and for the first time that evening, the whole room was looking at Sterling instead of at her, because Lord Sterling of Caelan was standing in the middle of his own ballroom with his hand shaking. "That pattern," he said quietly, "is called the Caelan turn. It was lost 80 years ago. There is one record of it in England, and it hangs in a locked case in this house, and it has hung there since before you were born, and no living weaver on this earth can reproduce it." Vespera looked down at her dress. "Then somebody ought to tell the river," she said. They kept her in the east wing overnight, in a room with a bed she did not sleep in, and at 9 the following morning a footman came and told her that Lord Sterling would see her in his study. The study was a long room with a fire going and a window that looked over the frost on the lawn. Sterling stood at the far end with his back to her, hands behind him, and on the desk between them lay her dress, spread out flat like a specimen on a mortuary table. "Sit," he said. "I'd rather stand, my lord." "Sit down, Miss Ashby." She sat. He turned around. He had not slept either. She could see it in the grey under his eyes, and there was a candle burnt down to a stub on the desk beside a magnifying glass and a stack of ledgers pulled from somewhere and left open. "There are 2 possibilities," Sterling said. "The first is that you entered this house at some point in the last 2 years, found your way to the locked archive, opened a case that has 1 key, and I carry it, copied a pattern that 4 men in England could even read, and then sewed it into a garment made of filth and wore it into my ballroom in front of 300 witnesses." He paused. "That is the first." "And the second?" "The second is impossible, so we will begin with the first." Vespera's face went hot. "You think I'm a thief?" "I think you are standing in a very small space between 2 very unpleasant conclusions." "Then I'll make it smaller for you." She stood up after all, and the chair scraped. "I have never been past your gates in my life. I have never seen your archive. I have never seen your key. I got those rags out of the river, my lord, and if you want to know exactly where, I can walk you to the spot and show you the mud I stood in, because I stood in it up to my knees every Sunday for 2 years, fishing your rubbish out of the water with a rake." Sterling did not move. "The river, below the outer district mills, where the drains come out. They dump what won't sell, the burnt lots, the bad dye, the pieces that come off the loom wrong. It goes in the water, and it catches on the stones at the bend, and by Sunday morning there's a raft of it, a yard thick, and half the district is down there picking it over before the current takes it on. I'm not the only one, my lord. I'm only the one who kept it. Kept it. Sorted it. 2 years' worth in crates under my table, by burn, by stain, by weave." She was speaking too fast now and could not stop. "Because after a while you start to see that they're not random, the bad ones. There's an order to how they've gone wrong. Same fault, over and over. Like the same hand made the same mistake 1,000 times and kept trying. So I laid them out. And when I laid them out properly, they made a shape. I didn't invent your Caelan turn. I found it. It was already in the rubbish. Somebody put it there." The fire cracked. Sterling walked to the desk very slowly and put one finger on the shoulder of the dress, on a strip of cotton scorched brown at one edge. "Describe the fault," he said. "My lord?" "The mistake. The same hand, the same mistake. Describe it." "The warps set too tight by a half thread every fourth pass," Vespera said. "It's not a mill fault. A mill wouldn't do it twice. It's somebody working a pattern that needs a loom they haven't got, so they're forcing it, and the cloth tears out of the frame every time." She shrugged one shoulder, miserable. "They never got it right. Not once. In all of it, my lord, there isn't one finished piece. Only 1,000 tries." Sterling had gone very still. He crossed to the wall behind his desk, took down a portrait, a woman, dark-haired, young, painted holding a shuttle in her lap the way another lady might hold flowers, and set it on the floor, facing away. Behind it was a cupboard. He unlocked it and brought out a small square of cloth, no bigger than a handkerchief, brown at one edge. He laid it on the shoulder of Vespera's dress. Same weave, same fault, same burn. "My mother," Sterling said, "kept a workshop in the south cellar of this house. She was not permitted to. A duchess does not weave, apparently, so she did it at night. She was trying to bring back the Kalen turn. She died before she finished. I was 11 weeks old." His voice did not change at all, which was somehow worse than if it had. "Her workshop was cleared out the same month. I was told everything in it was burnt." Vespera looked down at the dress, at 2 years of Sundays, at a yard-thick raft of ruined cloth on the bend of a river, arriving week after week after week. "My lord," she said carefully, "how long ago did she die?" 32 years. Then somebody's been at that loom for 32 years. Sterling's hand closed on the edge of the desk. Because the cloth in front of him was not old. The scorch was fresh. The dye had not had time to fade. Whatever had gone into the river at the bend below the mills had gone in this year, and last year, and the year before that. And someone had been sitting in the dark somewhere all his life, working his mother's pattern, failing, and throwing the failures into the water where any girl with a rake could find them. "Miss Ashby," he did not look up, "get your coat." The outer district mills stood in a row along the water like a set of black teeth, and the noise came out of them in a wall you could feel in your chest from 50 yards off. Sterling's carriage stopped at the yard gate at midday. He got down first. Vespera got down after him in a borrowed grey wool dress that fit her badly at the shoulders, and every head in the yard turned, because nobody in that district had ever seen a gentleman's carriage come further than the counting house. "Which building?" Sterling said. "None of them, my lord. The drain." She pointed past the sheds to where a brick arch let out onto the bank. "That's where it comes from, whatever's above it." "Above it is the finishing floor." "Then somebody on your finishing floor has been very busy." They had got perhaps 20 steps into the yard when a man came out of the counting house at a run and slowed himself down halfway, and arrived at a walk with his hat in his hands. Garrick, master weaver of the district, 40 years in the trade, a big square man with grey side whiskers and a coat too good for the yard he stood in. Vespera had seen him twice in her life, both times from the far side of a fence. "My Lord Sterling," he was breathing hard. "We had no word. Had we known, the floor would have been swept, the men would have been—" "I don't care about your floor. I want the drain opened." Garrick's eyes went past him. They landed on Vespera and stopped there, and something moved behind them, and it was not surprise. It was arithmetic. "My lord," he said slowly, "may I ask what this woman has told you?" "You may not." "Because I must speak, my lord, whatever it costs me." Garrick turned. He turned all the way around, to the yard, to the 40 men and women standing in the doorways of the sheds with their hands full of cloth, and he pitched his voice to Carrie, and Vespera understood 1 full second too late what was coming. "That's Ashby's girl!" Garrick shouted. "That's the thief!" The yard went quiet in patches, the way a crowd does. 2 years! Garrick had his arm out, pointing at her, and his voice cracked with a grief so well made that Vespera almost believed it herself. 2 years I've had lots go missing off this floor, and I could not name the hand. Bolts short by the yard, whole runs written off. I stood in that counting house last March, and I told the guild I did not know where it went. He swung back to Sterling. "It went in the river, my lord, over the sill and into the water and out the far side, and she was standing in the shallows with a rake." "That's not—" Vespera started. "She has crates of it," Garrick said. Vespera's mouth closed. "Crates," Garrick went on, quieter now, and every soul in the yard leaned in to hear it. "Under her table, sorted and stacked, 2 years of this mill's property in a weaver's room in Fen Lane, and she'll tell you she fished it out of the mud, my lord. And I ask you, who rakes a river every Sunday for 2 years for rubbish? Who does that for rubbish?" The silence afterwards was the worst thing Vespera had ever stood inside of, because it was true. All of it was true, every fact of it, and not 1 word of it was honest, and there was no way on God's earth to explain the difference to 40 people who had been hungry all winter and were now looking at a girl who had crates. "Bess," she said. She found the face she wanted in the crowd, a woman she had shared bread with for 6 years. "Bess, you were down there with me, Sunday after Sunday. You know what comes out of that drain." Bess looked at the ground. "Bess, he pays us Fridays, Vespera," Bess said, and did not look up. Somebody in the back said thief, and then somebody else said it, and it went round the yard like water finding a crack, and Vespera stood in the middle of it in a borrowed dress with her hands empty. "Enough!" Sterling did not raise his voice. He did not need to. The sound of it went through the yard like a blade through cloth, and the shouting stopped dead. "Mr. Garrick, you will open the drain." "My lord, the guild has a process." "Open it." "I cannot open a sealed drain on the word of a woman who has robbed this floor blind." Garrick had his feet planted now. He had found the ground he wanted, and he stood on it. "I'll have the charge laid before the magistrate this afternoon, my lord, and she'll be held until the sessions, and if you're wise, you'll be seen to have no part in it. Grand theft, my lord, 2 years of it. She'll take 14 years transportation, and she'll be lucky." Sterling looked at him for a long moment. Then he said very evenly, "How do you know they are under her table?" Garrick's mouth was still open on the next word. "You said crates under her table," Sterling said. "In a room in Fen Lane. You have never been in that room, Mr. Garrick. You did not know her name until I brought her through your gate. You looked at her for 4 seconds before you could put it to her face. And yet you know the number of years, and the manner of the sorting, and the article of furniture." Nothing moved in the yard. "So we will open the drain," Sterling said. "Or you will explain to me how you came to have the inventory of a house you have never entered." Garrick smiled then. It was not a good smile. "My lord," he said, "I'd have the magistrate before I'd have that." And he turned and walked back into the counting house, and Vespera heard the bolt go across the door. The warrant was sworn out on the Thursday morning. Vespera heard it from the boy who ran errands for the Kalen kitchens, who had it from his sister, who had it from a clerk. Grand theft against the Outer District mills, laid by Garrick, witnessed by 2 overseers and a woman named Bess Harrow, who had made her mark on the paper because she could not sign her name. The constables would come for her at noon. She was on the drive with her bundle under her arm when Sterling's carriage came round the corner of the house and stopped in front of her. "Get in," My lord, if they take me from your gate, it's a scandal, and if they take me from Fen Lane, it's only a Thursday. Let it be Fen Lane. Miss Ashby, get in the carriage. I'm not running. You are not running. You are being conveyed. He leaned across and opened the door himself, which no duke in England had done in 100 years. The magistrate sits Monday. That gives us 4 days and a horse. We are going to the Capitol Archives. She stood there in the cold with her bundle. Why? Because a charge is a story, Sterling said, and a story can be beaten by a better one. Get in. It was 3 miles to the Capitol along the turnpike, and they did it in the failing light with the frost coming down. Sterling sat opposite her with his hat on his knee and said nothing for the first 2 miles. Vespera watched the hedgerows go past and thought about Bess Harrow's thumbprint on a piece of paper. You're wondering why she did it, Sterling said. I know why she did it. He pays her Fridays. Vespera did not turn from the window. I'd have done it for her. If it were the other way about, and my choice was her or my mother's rent, I'd have made my mark too. That's the part nobody tells you about being poor, my lord. It isn't that people are wicked. It's that they can be bought so cheap it breaks your heart. Sterling did not answer for a while. Then he said, What is in the crates? 2,040 pieces. You counted them. I sorted them. You can't sort what you haven't counted. He almost said something and stopped. She saw him stop. The Capitol Archives was a gray building behind the Cloth Guild, 4 stories of ledgers and dust, and it opened at 8 and it closed at 6, and it had never in its history been asked to open at 7:30 in the evening. Sterling asked it anyway. The keeper looked at his card and at his face and unlocked the door. They started with the mill returns. There were 1,400 volumes of them, one for every year of every mill in the county, and Vespera took the ones for the outer district and carried 6 at a time to a long table under the lamps and began. Sterling watched her. He had meant to help. He got through half a volume and found that his eyes went past the columns without holding any of it, because he had never in his life looked at a ledger and expected to find anything in it that mattered. Ledgers were what other men brought him. Ledgers were the shape his estate took when it was carried into a room. Vespera read them the way a hungry person eats. She had a stub of pencil and a scrap of paper, and she made her own columns as she went. And after the first hour, she stopped turning pages one at a time and started going straight to the entries she wanted. And by the 3rd hour, she had a system he could not follow and did not interrupt. She read out loud without knowing she was doing it. Bad lot, March. Bad lot, March again. He writes off in March and September, my lord. Look, every year, twice, like a man paying a bill. Her hair came down. She pushed it back with her wrist because her fingers were black with dust. At 11:30, the keeper came to say the lamps must go out, and she said 5 minutes, without lifting her head, to a man she had never met, in a building she had no right to be in. And the keeper looked at Sterling, and Sterling said, Give her the 5 minutes. She took 40. He sat across the table with his coat over the back of the chair and watched a girl who had 4 shillings to her name work through the property of the county by lamplight because she had decided that the truth was in there somewhere and she was going to have it. Nobody had ever wanted anything in Sterling's presence the way she wanted this. That was the thing he could not get round, sitting there in the cold at midnight. He had been raised by people who were paid to be gentle with him. He had been flattered for 30 years by men who wanted his signature and women who wanted his name, and he had learned very young that the whole of it was a performance staged for his benefit, and he had stopped attending. It was easier not to look. It was easier to be cold, because cold cost nothing, and nobody could take it from you. She had come into his ballroom in a dress made of rubbish and told him she wanted to be looked at. Miss Ashby. Why did you not simply sell the cloth? Vespera looked up. Her face was grey with dust. and there were shadows under her eyes, and she was, he thought, entirely unaware of either. "Because somebody made it," she said. "Somebody sat at a loom and tried 2,000 times and got it wrong 2,000 times and threw it in a river. You don't sell that, my lord. You finish it." Sterling looked at her, and something in his chest, 32 years frozen, shifted like ice on a slow river. The vaults were under the archive, 2 floors down, and the keeper gave them a lamp and a key and said he would want both back by morning. They went down at 9 on Saturday night. Sunday, the archive closed. Monday, the magistrate sat. It was colder underground than it had been outside. The shelves ran back into the dark further than the lamp could reach, and the volumes on them were not the mill returns. These were the things the guild had taken in over a century and never catalogued. The estates that had failed, the workshops that had closed, boxes with names on them, and nothing inside but string. "Where do we start?" Sterling said. "With the year she died." He did not ask who. He went and found the shelf. They worked for 3 hours and found nothing, and Vespera's hands got so cold she had to sit on them between volumes, and Sterling took off his coat and put it round her shoulders, without any ceremony at all, and went back to the shelf before she could refuse it. At midnight she said, "My lord, come and look." It was a logbook. It was not a mill ledger. It was smaller, bound in green, the sort of thing a foreman keeps in his own pocket and hands to nobody. Somebody had put it in a box, marked with the name of a dye house that had shut in 1809, and it had sat there ever since, because nobody had ever had a reason to look for a thing they did not know existed. Inside it were dye lots, page after page of them, date, vat number, weight, color, and beside each one a small note in a cramped hand. Fault at 4th pass, fault at 4th pass, warp gone at 11 inches, fault at 4th pass. Vespera put her scrap of rag on the page. The dye number on the cloth matched the dye number in the book. Not the color, the number, the vat, the day, the exact half-ounce of matter that had gone into that exact water on that exact morning. Written down by a man who had wanted a record of what he was doing and had never once imagined anyone else would read it. 19 years, she said. Her voice had gone strange. "My lord, it starts 19 years ago, not 32, 19. Sterling took the book. He turned the pages slowly, and the lamp shook a little in his other hand, and Vespera watched his face and could not read it at all. 19 years ago, he said, Garrick came to the outer district. Then he's been trying to weave your mother's pattern for 19 years. He has been trying to weave it and failing. Sterling turned another page, and every time he failed, he put the failure in the river and wrote the loss into my books. 2 write-offs a year, March and September, exactly as you said. My estate has been paying for his education." "But that's, my lord, that's madness. 19 years for a pattern. A man could learn 6 trades in 19 years. "Not this pattern," he said it flatly. "There is one record of the Kalen turn in England, and it is in a locked case in my house. He has never seen it. He has been working from something else." "From what?" Sterling stopped turning. He had reached the back of the logbook, where the pages went blank, and pressed flat inside the rear board was a single sheet of paper, folded in 4, soft as cloth from being opened and refolded 10,000 times. He took it out. He opened it under the lamp. It was a drawing of a loom setting, done in ink, with the warp tension marked in a fine hand along the margin, and in the bottom corner, small, the way a person signs a thing meant for their own eyes, were 2 letters. A.K. Sterling did not move. "My lord?" "Aurelia Kalen," he said. The vault was very quiet. "He didn't steal it from your archive," Vespera said slowly. "He had it from her. She gave it to him." "She gave it to somebody." Sterling's thumb moved once across the corner of the page and stopped. She could not work the loom herself. A duchess does not weave. She needed hands. She needed a man in the trade who would keep his mouth shut and sit at the frame at night and try it, and try it, and try it again. He looked up. She had a weaver, Miss Ashby. She had a partner. And he has been sitting in the dark for 19 years trying to finish the work of a woman who has been dead for 32, and failing, and throwing it in the water. Then he's not a thief, Vespera said. He is a man who has spent his whole life failing to do the one thing that would have made him, Sterling said. And on Thursday evening, a girl walked into my ballroom having done it in 11 weeks out of what he threw away. Vespera sat down on the edge of a crate rather suddenly.
He's not accusing me because he's frightened I'll expose the money, she said. He couldn't care less about the money. He's accusing me because I did it.
And Lord Sterling of Caelan, standing in a freezing vault 2 floors under the ground at midnight with his mother's handwriting in his fingers, looked at her, at the dust in her hair and his coat swallowing her shoulders, and her whole face lit up with the terrible pleasure of having understood something. And he smiled. It happened without permission. It went right across his face and stayed there. Vespera looked up and saw it, and forgot every word she had been about to say.
"My lord," she said, "your face."
"What about it?"
"Nothing," she said. "Nothing at all."
And she looked back down at the book so that he would not see her eyes, and Sterling stood in the lamplight with an expression he had no name for, feeling it, like a man discovering he has a hand he never knew was there. The magistrate sat on Monday and did not commit her. Sterling stood in the panelled room in the Capitol with the green logbook under his arm and said that the charge rested on the sworn word of the man whose own hand had written the losses, and that he would produce the ledger at the sessions in April, and that until then he would stand surety for Miss Ashby in the sum of £400. The magistrate looked at the sum and at the name attached to it and bound her over to appear. £400. Vespera did the arithmetic on the way out and had to stop on the steps. "It is a bond, Miss Ashby. It is not spent." "It's spent if I run." "Then do not run," Sterling said, and put her in the carriage. The council chamber at Caelan Estate had a long table and 11 chairs and a window that faced north, so the room was never warm. Sterling took the head of it on the Wednesday morning with Vespera standing at his shoulder in the grey wool dress, and the advisers filed in and sat down and did not look at her once, which she found took a particular kind of effort. There were 4 of them. The one who mattered was Halloway, 70, silver, soft-voiced, steward of the Caelan Estate since before Sterling could walk, the man who had signed every paper of his. "I am appointing Miss Ashby chief designer of the Caelan workshops," Sterling said. "The appointment is effective this morning. She will present under the Caelan name at the exposition on the 15th. Nobody spoke. Then Halloway folded his hands on the table. "No, my lord," he said. "I beg your pardon. The exposition is funded by subscription. 4 houses stand behind the Caelan stall, the Marches, the Petries, Lord Bramwell, and this estate, and 3 of those 4 will withdraw their money before Friday if that name goes on the card." Halloway's voice never rose. It never had in 30 years. "It is not my opinion, my lord. It is a fact I have had in writing since Monday afternoon. They have heard about the ballroom. They have heard about the drive to the Capitol and the £400 and the night in the archive with no chaperone, and they have arrived, all of them, at the same conclusion. Which is that you have taken up a mill girl under a charge of grand theft," Halloway said, "and that you propose to hang your mother's name round her neck in front of the entire guild." Vespera felt the words go into her like cold water. "Miss Ashby found the pattern," Sterling said. "Miss Ashby found rubbish, my lord, and made something clever of it, and I do not doubt she is the most gifted hand in this county." Halloway looked at her then, for the first time, and there was no cruelty in it, which somehow made it worse. "I am 70 years old, my dear. I have watched 4 estates go down in my lifetime, and not one of them went down because the work was bad. They went down because the money took fright. The money is taking fright now." "Then the money may take fright," Sterling said. "The money is the exposition. Withdraw the subscription and there is no stall. And if there is no stall, there is no answer to Garrick. And Garrick presents his line on the 15th, and the guild buys it. And by April, when the sessions sit, he is the master of the district, and she is a thief with a ledger nobody will read." Holloway spread his hands. "I am not against you, my lord. I am telling you the shape of the water." Sterling was silent for a long moment. "You cleared her workshop," he said. The room changed. "My lord?" "The south cellar. 32 years ago, the month she died. You had the workshop cleared and you told me everything in it was burnt. You told me that when I was 9 years old and I asked you, and you told me again when I was 19. Sterling had not moved at all. "It was not burnt. It went out of this house. Where did it go, Holloway?" Holloway's face did not change, but his hands, folded on the table, went white at the knuckles. "It went where she wanted it to go," he said. "That is not an answer. It is the only one I have." The old man stood up, slowly, the way a man does at 70. "Your mother made me promise a thing, my lord, and I have kept it for 32 years, and I will keep it 4 days more, because if I break it now, it will not save you. It will only make certain of the ruin." He gathered his papers. "Withdraw the appointment. Present the line under the estate's own name and let Miss Ashby be paid handsomely and quietly, and in 3 years, when nobody remembers the ballroom, put her name on the card and I will hold the coats. That is what I would do. That is what I am for." He went to the door. "Holloway, my lord, did she trust you?" The old man stopped with his hand on the latch, and for the length of one breath, he looked every day of his age. "She trusted 2 people in this house," he said. "I have spent 32 years wishing I had been the wiser of them." The door closed. Vespera stood in the cold north light with her heart going like a loom. "My lord," she said quietly, "he's right about the money." "He is right about all of it. That is his particular unpleasantness." Sterling turned. "It changes nothing." "It changes everything." She was looking at the table, at the 11 chairs, at 300 years of a family that had been standing here long before anybody fished anything out of a river. "You'd lose the subscription over a name on a card." "Yes." "Then don't," Vespera said, and went to get her coat. Fen Lane was 2 rooms over a chandler's shop, and it smelled of tallow all day and all night, and Vespera had lived there for 11 years. She got back on the Thursday evening and lit her own candle and stood in the doorway and looked at it. The loom under the window, the crates under the table, 2,040 pieces sorted by burn and stain and weave. A chipped basin, a shelf with 4 books on it. It had seemed a whole life to her 3 weeks ago. She had put the kettle on the hob when the knock came. Sterling filled the doorway. He had come without the carriage. His boots were ruined to the ankle and there was frost in his hair, and he had walked 3 miles down a turnpike in the dark because a carriage in Fen Lane would have been round the district by morning. "You left without a word." "I left a word. I left it with the kitchen boy." "You left thank you," Sterling said. "That is not a word. That is a door closing." Vespera turned back to the hob so she would not have to look at him. "Sit down, my lord. There's 1 chair. It's yours." He did not sit. "I have written to the Marches and the Petries," he said. "They may withdraw. Bramwell will follow them. He always does. I have gone through it with the steward's clerk, and I can stand the exposition alone out of the estate's own funds if I sell the Dorset land, which I have never seen and which brings in less than it costs to keep. There is no ruin in it. Halloway is a frightened old man, and he has made you frightened too.
And after the exposition?
After the exposition, there is the work.
There's 300 years of your family, my lord, and 11 houses that won't sit at your table, and a Duke of Caelan who sold Dorset for a mill girl.
Vespera set the kettle down harder than she meant to.
That's what it'll be called. Not a design, not a pattern, a mill girl. And in 5 years, when it's gone quiet and dull between us, and it will, my lord, everything does, you'll look at the empty chairs and you'll do the arithmetic.
And I will be sitting on the other side of it, being the answer you didn't like. That is not, and here's the thing you haven't thought of. She turned round. I'd have to sit there and take it, because you paid. You paid the 400, and you'd pay the Dorset land, and every day for the rest of my life I'd be a debt you were carrying. And I have been many things in this room, my lord, but I have never once been that. Sterling was quiet. Then he reached into his coat and put a folded paper on her table.
What is it?
It is a settlement, 200 a year in your name, held in trust, unconditional. It is not the appointment, it is not charity, it is what my mother would have paid the person who found her work, and she would have thought it insulting to offer less. He said it carefully, the way a man reads out something he has rehearsed on a 3-mile walk. You need not take the post. You need not see me again. Take it and go to London and set up your own frame and be answerable to nobody on this earth. I want you to have it. Vespera looked at the paper for a long moment. Then she picked it up and held it in the candle and let it burn down to her fingers and dropped it in the basin. Sterling did not move.
Do you know what you've just done?
Yes.
That was 200 a year.
That was you deciding for me, Vespera said. Again. You decided I'd go in the carriage. You decided about the bond. You decided about Dorset, and you did it all without asking me once. And now you've decided how I'm to be free, and the shape of the freedom you've drawn for me is go away and be comfortable. Her voice was shaking, and she let it. I don't want 200 a year, my lord. I want you to look at what's under that table and tell me it's worth something. That's all I ever came to your house for. Not a purse, not a settlement. You are the only man in England who can read that cloth, and I want you to read it, and I want you to say it out loud in front of the guild, and if you can't say it without buying it first, then it isn't worth anything at all, and neither am I. The tallow spat in the candle. Say what? Sterling said.
That I'm a master of the craft, not a girl you found, not a girl you saved, a master, on the work, on the cloth, on Thursday, in that hall, with my name on the card and nothing of yours in my pocket. She wiped her face with the back of her wrist, furious at herself. And if the money runs away, let it run. I've never had any, I'll manage. Sterling stood in her doorway in his ruined boots and looked at her. He had been offered a great many things in his life. He had never once been refused, and he found that being refused by Vespera Ashby was the most complete pleasure he had ever experienced, and that his face had done the thing again, and that this time he did not want to stop it. Then hear me, he said. Vespera Ashby is the finest weaver in this county, and probably in England, and on the 15th she will present under her own name, and I will stand behind her chair and put not 1 shilling in her hand. He took his hat. But I will require one thing of you, Miss Ashby, and I will ask, since you object to being decided for.
Ask then. Bring the dress. The Grand Capitol Exhibition Hall held 900 people under a glass roof, and by 11 on the morning of the 15th, every one of them was in it. The Marches had withdrawn, the Petries had withdrawn, Bramwell had followed, as Sterling said he would, and the Caelan stall stood at the north end of the hall with a bare board and a card that said V. Ashby, In a hand that everybody could see was Vespera's own, and people came past to look at it the way they would look at a scaffold. At the south end, Garrick had 40 feet of frontage and 6 men in livery. His line went up at noon. He had it drawn off the rollers by 2 boys in white gloves, and the cloth came down in a fall of 40 yards, and the hall made a sound Vespera had never heard 900 people make. Because it was beautiful. It was the turn. Not finished. She saw it in the first 4 seconds, the fault at the 4th pass running all the way down like a crack in glass. But nobody else in that hall could see the fault. And the pattern spiraled and moved in the light from the glass roof, and the guildmasters came off their chairs and forward, and Garrick stood beside it with his hat in his hands and his eyes wet. "Gentlemen," he said, 19 years. "He's going to win," Vespera said. "He is not." "My lord, look at them." "Wait." The chairman of the guild, a small, dry man named Petrie, who had withdrawn his own money 4 days before, came down from the platform with a glass in his hand and stood in front of Garrick's cloth for a long time. Then he said, "Whose pattern is this, Mr. Garrick?" "Mine, sir." "You made it." 19 years at the frame, sir. There's not a man alive can say different." And Sterling stepped out from the north end of the hall. He crossed the whole floor with the green log book in his hand and 900 people watching, and he did not go to the platform. He went to Garrick's cloth. He put out one hand and took the falling edge of it and turned it to the light from the roof, exactly as he had turned Vespera's sleeve in his ballroom 11 days before. "4th pass," he said. "Warp gone at 11 inches. Garrick's face did not move. "You could not hold the tension," Sterling said. "You have never been able to hold the tension. You have been at this frame since I was 13 years old, and you have not once got past 11 inches, and every time it tore out, you carried it to the sill and put it in the water and wrote the loss into my books in March and in September, and my estate has paid for every yard of your 19 years. He held up the logbook. "This is yours. Die lots, VAT numbers, and a note in your own hand on every page. It was in a box in the guild's own vault under a dye house that shut in 9, and I have had it read by the guild's clerk, and he will swear to the hand." Petrie took the book. He opened it. He looked at the page, and at the cloth, and at the numbers, and his face began to change. "But you did not steal my mother's pattern, Mr. Garrick," Sterling said. "That is what I came to say." The hall went absolutely still. Sterling turned the logbook to the last page and took out the folded sheet, soft as cloth, and opened it, and held it up so the light came through it. A.K. "She gave it to you," he said. "She could not sit at a frame herself. She needed a weaver who would work at night and say nothing, and she chose you. And you were 23 years old, and you said yes. And 11 weeks after I was born, she died, and left you a pattern you could not read, and a promise you could not put down." His voice had gone very quiet, and every soul in that hall was leaning in to catch it. 19 years, you said. You lied, Mr. Garrick. It has been 32. Garrick's hat dropped out of his hands. "You have not been robbing me," Sterling said. "You have been trying. Every March and every September for the whole of my life, and you could not stop, and you could not finish, and you could not tell me, because the only thing you had left of her was the one thing she asked you, to keep quiet." The old man's mouth worked. Nothing came out of it. And then Vespera Ashby walked up the length of the grand Capitol Exhibition Hall in a dress made of rags. 900 faces turned. She did not look at one of them. She went to Garrick's cloth, and she stood beside it, and the light came down through the glass roof onto her shoulder, and the spiral on the rags caught it and lit and turned, and it was the same pattern, running clean, unbroken, all the way to the hem. Finished. She lifted her sleeve and laid it against his 40 yards.
11 inches, she said gently. It's the shed, Mr. Garrick. You're lifting the whole warp at the 4th pass, and it can't carry that. You have to lift it in halves and let the second half come late. It's in the failures. It's in all of them, if you lay them out in order. It's in yours. You wrote the answer down 2,000 times and threw it in the river.
Garrick looked at her sleeve. Then he sat down on the floor of the Grand Capitol Exhibition Hall, in front of the whole guild, and put his hands over his face, and made a sound that no one there ever spoke about afterwards. Petrie closed the logbook. "Mr. Garrick," he said, "you are dismissed from the mastership of the district, and the guild will hear the matter of the write-offs in April." He turned. "Miss Ashby, your card says you present alone?"
"It does, sir."
"Then present," said Petrie, "and God help the rest of us." The Kalin collection went up on the 16th at 4 in the afternoon, and by sunset there was not a yard of it unsold. 9 pieces. She had woven 6 of them herself in a fortnight, working through the nights in the estate's south cellar with the shutters open because she could not bear the closeness, and 3 of them she had drawn and given to the hands at the mill to make. Bess Harrow among them, who had come to the gate on the Saturday and stood in the yard for an hour before she could knock. Vespera had opened the door herself. "I made my mark on that paper," Bess said.
"You did. I've not slept since." "Then come in," Vespera had said, "because I've 40 yards on the frame and 11 days, and you're the best pair of hands in the district, and I've always said so." Bess had cried in the doorway for a while. Then she had come in and taken off her shawl and sat down at the frame, and neither of them ever spoke of it again. The guild bought the lot. The Marches wrote on the Tuesday asking whether their subscription might be considered still open, and Sterling wrote back that it might be considered whatever they liked, and the Petries wrote on the Wednesday, and Lord Bramwell arrived in person on the Thursday and was told the Duke was in the cellar and could not be disturbed, which was true, because he was standing behind a chair watching a woman thread a loom. Halloway came to him in the long gallery on the Friday morning with his resignation written out. Sterling did not take it. "Sit down," he said. "My lord."
"You promised her you would say nothing. You kept it for 32 years and it cost you every hour of them. And you were wrong, and you knew you were wrong, and you kept it anyway, because she asked you." Sterling pushed the paper back across the table. "That is not a thing I can dismiss a man for. That is the only reason I have ever had to trust you." Halloway looked at the paper for a long moment.
"She was afraid, my lord," he said at last.
"That is what nobody understands now. She was a duchess, and she wanted to weave, and if it had got out, she would have been laughed at in every drawing room in England. And so she did it in a cellar at night, with the door locked, and made 2 people swear." His voice was not quite steady. "I have thought, sometimes, that if she had simply gone into the ballroom and told them all to laugh, she would have had 32 years of it, my lord. She would have had the work." "Yes," Sterling said. "It took a girl with 4 shillings to do what a duchess could not." Halloway laughed, wetly, and put his handkerchief away.
"Garrick's asked to see her," he said. "The old fool's in Fen Lane of all places, lodging over the chandlers."
"I know. She has been going every second day. To what end, my lord?" "She is teaching him the shed," Sterling said. "She says he has 32 years of hands and 11 days of sense, and it would be a waste of a man to throw the hands away with the rest." The balcony at Kalin faced west, and the 16th day came down over the park in a long red evening. Vespera came out with her hair down and dust still on her wrists, because she had come straight from the cellar, and she leaned on the stone rail beside him and looked at the whole estate going gold at the edges.
9 pieces, she said, sold in 3 hours. 41 orders standing. The clerk brought them up at noon. You were asleep at the frame, and I would not have you woken.
You should have woken me.
You had been at it 19 hours.
That's nothing. She rubbed her eye and left another streak of dust. Halloway's put me in the north workshop. 6 frames. He asked what I wanted, and I told him, and he wrote it all down, my lord, every word, like I was somebody. You are somebody. I know. She said it simply, without any heat in it at all, and that was the thing that undid him. 3 weeks ago, she had walked into his ballroom to be looked at. Now she stood on his balcony and said, I know the way a person says the weather is fine. Sterling turned round and put his back to the rail. Vespera. She looked up. He had never used her name before. I have been trying for a fortnight to find the correct way to say this, he said, and every version I construct is a version in which I give you something, and you have taught me that I am not to do that. So I find I have nothing to offer at all, and must simply stand here and tell you the truth. That's usually the way of it. I did not smile for 32 years because there was nothing in this house worth smiling at, and I had decided that was the world's fault and not mine, and I was comfortable in that decision. And you came in wearing rubbish and ruined the whole arrangement in about 4 seconds. He was doing it now, the smile, and it had stopped being an event and become a fact of his face. I am in love with you. I have no settlement to offer and no land to sell, and you would only burn it. I have my name, which you do not need, and my hands, which are useless, and my company, which nobody has ever wanted. Vespera considered him. I've 6 frames and 41 orders, she said, and I'm short a man who can read cloth. That is not an answer. It's the only one I've got, my lord. It's the best thing I own. And she reached over and took his useless hand off the rail and held it, and the sun went down behind the park, and somewhere below them in the south cellar, the loom stood threaded and waiting for the morning.